Hey everybody, I'm back again. I know what is going on. It's almost as if there's like a lockdown going on, something like that, and I'm a year behind the times, so I'm just starting to realize that I can do stuff like this. God, I need a shave. Actually, I just need a complete remake. Just start all over again. Hey, Hasbro, how about a brand new David? Yeah, does that make any sense? Um, I just wanted to do a follow-up video to the last video which I did, which was the uh, does it end video. Is there an end point? And the reason I wanted to do this video was because I got such an influx of responses that I was kind of taken aback. And there were some really good ones, and I sort of wanted to follow up on a few of the points that were raised by you. So consider this the mailbag. I've had like something like 50 or 60 different responses from different groups. So apologies if I'm not going to read yours out verbatim, because a lot of them were pretty much exactly the same. But there's a few that I picked out which I think sort of sums up uh, sort of a lot of the points that people were raising in very interesting ways. I want to give a big thank you to everybody who left a comment and took the time to watch the video and obviously give it some thought and put those thoughts into words for me to read. So thank you very much. Thank you also as well to the TFUK Facebook group. Shout out to them, and there'll be a link in the description down below. Always good to see a thriving UK community. They really came out and left some great comments. And again, thank you to everybody who left comments in everywhere that I posted. So I'm going to, like I say, go through a couple of the ones that I thought were interesting. And like I say, apologies if I don't get to yours. The first one I want to start off with was literally literally the first replies that I got was from Claire, the better half of Andy from the TFUK, the show, and she says, "Does divorce count?" Andy, I would highly recommend that your good lady and my good lady never meet. Otherwise, our lives, I think, are ruined as collectors. All right, because I think they're pretty much on the same wavelength here. Yeah, it's either me or the Transformers, and one day it's going to come to loggerheads. But in all seriousness, it does bring up an interesting point, doesn't it? Life moves on. We get married, we meet significant others, children start becoming a thing, and suddenly priorities shift. And that's that's an interesting thing. Now, obviously, divorce is something that actually is going to come up later on, but it's interesting how obviously priorities move. There was a few people just said, no, look, I just don't ever see myself stopping. And I remember when I was there, I remember those sort of the early 2000s when I got back into collecting, and it was like, this is it. Transformers will never ever leave my life. When I talk about priority shifting and stuff like that, I think for me, it's just a case of realizing that everything doesn't bring me joy necessarily anymore, because I've been there. I was the guy that collected everything, and now that everything sits in plastic tubs in my garage. Um, Sorry, you'll have to bear with me while I just quickly scroll through these. And try and find the ones that. So people talked. Matt, for Matt, for example, said my ultimate goal is to have a decent figure of every character from the comic and cartoon, tall order, but this at least provides a checklist of sorts, and that's kind of my mentality in regards to it as well. I kind of know what I want, and as a result, I know that, I'm still waiting for the last two Target Masters from the Autobots, from, Point Blank and Sure Shot. I'm still waiting for the Throttle Bots, things like that. But there's also random figures that I like to buy. As long as those keep getting made, I don't think I'll ever stop as such. And a few people have sort of agreed with this sentiment, this idea that, I if there's something that just comes along that takes my fancy, then I'm going to buy it. That irrespective of whether or not it's a character I like or whether it's a based on a particular piece of media that I enjoy, as long as the toy itself entertains me, then I'm going to go all in on it. And I kind of approach it from a different perspective. Sort of my perspective is that I'm a fan of the characters first, and the toy is then sort of simply a representation of that particular character. I'm less inclined to buy a toy based purely on the aesthetics of that toy, because otherwise, if I'm not say for example, they produce a brand new figure. We've had the recent repaint of Sideswipe. I can't remember what the figure is called, but it's a brand new character. Yeah, never seen before. People seem to enjoy it because it's a good mold and it's in new color scheme. Means nothing to me, absolutely nothing. That said, and I'll use this as an example. When Transformers animated, and I'm using an example from like over a decade ago, but you know, maybe this gives you some idea of the last time I thought Transformers was really excellent. But when they released Shockwave in Transformers Animated, they released him in a grey colour scheme. He wasn't his traditional purple. And they announced that they were going to do the purple version of Shockwave as a repaint. And I remember sitting and thinking to myself, well, I appreciate the fact that Shockwave is purple traditionally, but he's grey in the show, so I'm not bothered about the repaint. Until the episode when he got found out and he ended up back with the Decepticons, and then he suddenly changed his colour scheme to purple, and he was like purple Shockwave. And then it was like, right, okay, I need to track down the purple one. Because it was in line with the character that I enjoyed from the show. If, I don't know, any other Transformer repainted themselves, the Rodimus, for example, in The Lost Light in More Than Meets the Eye, when he changed his colour scheme. Appreciate the fact that there wasn't an official toy released of that, and it was third party, and from what I understand, it's a good toy. No interest whatsoever. None whatsoever. Because I didn't necessarily have a particular attachment to that version of Rodimus. A lot of people have said that, you know, they're trying to complete like comic book sets. Adam said that. And a lot of people said that, you know, they're looking for like masterpiece versions. And I think Masterpiece is a very interesting one, because when it comes to Masterpiece, you're never going to be able to get a complete set of anything purely on licensing and things like that, which means you have to rely on third party. And I've always found relying on third party to be a bit dubious. That said, I'm not very well versed in third party. So, you know, it could be that there are plenty of third party groups out there that meet those needs. But as far as I'm concerned, every time I look at third party, it's just another third party Stunticon set. Adrian brought up the point of display space. If I have no space to display them, then something that is on display has to give. That way I'm not hoarding too much. That's an interesting point there. Like, I'm terrible. I'm really terrible at parting with stuff that I have, even if it's been sat in a tub for 5 years. Generally speaking, the only reason that I'll part with something is because I'll see somebody who says, "Does anybody have this?" and I know it's lying around and things like that, so I'll get rid of it. And that is unfortunately a hoarder mentality of mine. Phil says, so for me, I'm just glad that I have a decent idea of collecting plans these days. Like, for instance, I'm almost finished with what now became a Season 1 Autobot shelf, and almost finished a Japanese Headmaster series Decepticons shelf. But after those two shelves, it's a bit more ambiguous. Again, going back to that idea of just sort of picking up, you know, I currently have a growing collection of Maximals. So it's good to see that, like, people are branching out and things like that. Again, based on what they enjoy, but ultimately comes back to shelf space. Ash says, it never ends. Classic Simon Furman. Well, the GIF anyway says it. Um, Simon said, I'm getting bored of buying the same old things over and over. It's like completing character collection. Between Titans and Gen 1, or Gen, it was getting there. Then they bring out Siege, and it's pretty much the same figures again in Earthrise. I think to buy two similar figures so soon pushes me towards the end of being a chug completionist. And I agree with that. I'm not a completionist by any means, but I can see, especially with the fiasco with things like Ratchet and Ironhide and things like that, the fact that those figures literally came out within a year to a year and a half between each other. And, you know, it was either the Cybertronian versions, which were difficult to get hold of if you were Ratchet, or it's the Earth ones, which were just difficult to get hold of, full stop. And that, I think, absolutely does play a part in it. But uh, we've talked about exclusives and things like that, and how I really do think Hasbro dropped the ball. Um, People again talking about sort of which which characters they like. Kyle ends his comment. He says that he's, you know, trying to get every Decepticon in the modern G1 style, but he also says also cool Starscreams, and that's an interesting one as well, isn't it? Where you have an affinity for a particular character, like one character, and I've seen this before with things like Optimus Primes and Jazzers and things like that, where somebody is just a fan of a particular character, and that's their goal. It's like, I want to have all of the Starscreams, or I want to have all of the Megatrons, or whatever it is. And that, I think, is interesting on the basis of the fact that the characters are so different based on the incarnations that they have, yeah? Like, for example, is Optimus Primal an Optimus Prime? Like, does that count? Okay, maybe not. But what about, if that doesn't count, what about something like Power Master Optimus Prime? Now, of course, he was in the comics and stuff like that, but what about in Japan? What about Master Force? Yeah? That wasn't Optimus Prime, but it looked like Optimus Prime. Does that count? Like, it's funny when people go for these uh, collections based on characters. I always find that interesting. And if you do that, if you're a fan of one particular character, it'd be great to hear. Where do you draw the line? What is the line in the sand for your particular version of a particular character that you collect? Um, Ian says that he buys figures based entirely on coolness, and I suppose that's great, because then you're not locked into a collector's mentality where you have to buy everything, unless, of course, you find everything to be cool. Um, I mentioned before that divorce was going to come up again. Damien said, 2 years ago, I was just in characters I genuinely loved from the G1 and MP form. Okay, fairly sensible. Then I moved to China, got a divorce, and suddenly all bets were off. Now I'm much less discriminate. I'm even toying with MMC Orion packs, characters I've never seen before. Which, again, your life changes, and suddenly all bets are off. Now it's all Transformers all the time. So yeah, there was some really, really nice ones from the TFUK. Comments from YouTube as well were great. Again, people talking about stuff. Exilion says, I think as long as there's stuff coming out, this is an interesting point. I think as long as there's good stuff coming out, I'm happy to carry on. Alternatively, if the whole community ended tomorrow, that might bring his collecting to an end quicker. And that's interesting, isn't it? How much is your collection community driven? How much is your collection driven by watching YouTube videos of reviewers, listening to podcasts, going on websites and things like that? If you were purely driven by, that pre-internet mentality of just go to the shop and buy the thing that's cool, would you buy half the stuff? I've got to admit, I probably wouldn't. If it was down to like just watching a cartoon and then buying the toy of it, yeah, because you would go back to that early 90s, sort of early 2000s, where you weren't entirely sure on what is out there. Like, for people who join the community now, it's so easy with the wiki and things like that. But I remember where I was when I saw, like, my first Deathsaurus, or my first Star Saber, or any of these weird Japanese figures that we'd never come across before. And, it wasn't as if they were all fleshed out. Um, the Mapes, Steve and Dave Mapes, who help out with TF Nation, they tell really fascinating stories of, like, the early 90s, getting in touch with people in Japan and ordering these bizarre boxes of toys that they've got no concept of. And, it turns out to be a Star Saber, a Deathsaurus, whatever it may be. And I guess for people like that, those that have that collector's mentality, you're always going to have that. But I don't think that's necessarily something that I would side with. And so I think without the community, yeah, I think I would struggle, just like Exilion says, to carry on. Soundwave SG1 says, I'll never stop collecting. They'll just find a way to pull me back in. And that's an interesting thing, isn't it? The Transformers franchise, the brand itself, just constantly keeps getting replenished and updated and things like that. So ultimately, is there an end point if you're just a fan of it? Kitchman says, excellent video and hits on the point. It was brutal trying to purchase the store exclusive figures, a real turn off for collecting. With the addition of Huffer, I would need tracks and gears to just be done collecting. I will then pick up figures very casually. Thanks for the bit again. Very much like what we've talked about, where we've talked about the idea of, once you get to the end, it doesn't necessarily mean it is the end. It just means that you can still go ahead and collect toys now and again. It's not like as if you suddenly just walk away from it, because I think that's the thing, isn't it? If you're going to be done with it, then you're literally walking away from everything, and I think people don't want that, because there is, as Exilion mentioned, a sense of community. But yeah, so thank you. Look, I could go on for ages, but I've gone on for nearly 20 minutes now, and I'm still not even halfway through all of the comments. But thank you to everybody. It's good food for thought. It is. And if you're up for it and interested, I might be inclined to do another one of these videos. I hope the TFUK guys don't mind that I've posted these videos on their group and stuff like that. But I appreciate it. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care of yourselves. And you know what? Like, I know that it was kind of like an almost end of an era sort of question and stuff like that. But ultimately, what I think I took from it is that people are, like, still happy to collect, and that there's still a vibrant community out there that, wants to keep buying this stuff. And that's great news. Let's just hope that Hasbro can find a way to diversify the line a little bit further for those that are kind of sick of the Chug Generation 1 repeats that keep coming out. I say that, but they can do that once they've finished what I want, alright? Because I'm a purely selfish bar steward. Anyway, take care of yourselves, everybody. Thanks very much, and I'll see you all later. Bye for now.